Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Training Tidbits podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge from Animal Training Academy, and I'm extremely excited about having you here with us today, being back in your eardrums to talk all about best practice behavior management for what is set to be another amazing episode. I can't wait to dive in and learn all about today's guest and their learning odyssey. If you haven't checked the past episodes out yet, then make sure to head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and you can listen to them all there, or you can also find them on iTunes and / or on Stitcher. There is definitely something there for absolutely everyone, as well as some sensational up-and-coming episodes planned over the next wee while. Just before we do get started, though, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that listens to this podcast on a regular basis. Or maybe you're joining us for the first time ever. This show is so much fun to make, and I get truly inspired thinking about all the people that have benefited from all the wisdom our podcast guests have shared. Today's episode is, of course, going to be no exception to this. And if you do like the episode today, then please share it as far and as wide as you possibly can. I appreciate that most of you are listening to this on podcast apps from your mobile devices and smartphones. So the easiest way to do that from there, and would be really appreciated, is if you go to the title of this episode, you'll find 3 little dots depending on what app you're using. And if you tap on this, it's going to open a menu. One option in that menu is share. You can put it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat, put it on all of the things, whatever social media network you might use. I would be extremely grateful if you could take a couple of seconds to do that. But we will get started on today's episode, where I'm going to be talking to Eva Bertilsson. Eva has a master's degree in behavior analysis and a passion for all things related to behavior, learning, and animal welfare. Together with business partner Emily Johnson-Vague, Eva runs their collaboration Carpe Momentum, teaching seminars on the general principles of behavior and learning and coaching trainers in the art of structuring great training sessions, regardless of the venue or the species. Eva is a board member in the Swedish Association for Behavior Analysis, a faculty member of Clicker Expo, and an enthusiastic disseminator of ethical practices based in behavioral science. In addition to her own teaching, she has also been instrumental in introducing Tag Teach and Fair Free, as well as numerous renowned speakers, for example, Susan Friedman, Susan Schneider, and Clive Wynne, to the Scandinavian audience. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome one Eva Bertilsson to the show today. Eva, how are you?
Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be a guest in your show.
And it's such an honor to have you as a guest. And we've had a really fun conversation leading up to this podcast. So I can't wait to dive in. And thank you, Eva, for taking time out of your day today. We really appreciate it. So we will dive straight into the first question. Could you please take everyone listening back to where you first started to learn about positive reinforcement animal training, and maybe share a couple of stories about some of the first animals that you ever worked with, you ever trained using positive reinforcement?
It's interesting thinking back. I don't have a specific memory of my first positive reinforcement training. I do know, however, that the lovely little Welsh pony that we had when I was a child did know a couple of tricks. And I know that she got treats for doing those tricks. I think that was probably my sort of earliest lessons in using positive reinforcement, would be offering treats to the pony for doing cute tricks with us. More formally, I was reading a lot of dog books before I ever had my first dog. As a teenager, I was reading everything I could come across. I was reading Swedish authors like Anders Hallgren or Cecilia Holmstedt, who were writing about positive reinforcement training already in books written in the 80s. Anders had a book called Shaping, referring to operant conditioning and positive reinforcement training. I think it came out in 1988, something like that. And then my dog training got started in 1992. And I ended up doing a lot of agility. That was basically by accident. My dog training club in 94 wanted somebody to work as an agility instructor. And they decided that that should be me. I knew nothing about agility, but I was sort of one of the younger, and I had a cute, fluffy dog, and they thought it would be fun for me. So they sent me away on an agility instructor's course. And they sent me with a book of Swedish author Marie Hansson on agility. I was saying a lot of things like, never tell your dog if he does something wrong, or never stop your dog. Just use positive reinforcement, keep working. I think that was like getting started with just never mind if the dog makes any mistakes, just keep working, keep going, keep the happy attitude. That was very much part of my beginning in dog training. And then in 97, I encountered clicker training for the first time. I was at an evening lecture with Misty. I had a Falaine, Papillon with drop ears. And we were sitting at this evening lecture, getting to hear about clicker training and about shaping. And I had used lure reward training up until then, basically. I hadn't done any proper sit still, watch what your learner is doing, mark and reinforce type of training. And for some reason, sitting there, looking at my dog, trying to capture something she was doing, although it was a bit frustrating for the both of us because I didn't have the mechanics and my dog didn't have any foundation in how this should work. We went home and I was sitting on the kitchen floor until the middle of the night, shaping her to go under a kitchen chair. I think we spent first we spent 3 hours at that evening seminar. And then I think I spent 4 hours on the kitchen floor. And it was just the coolest thing ever to see this light bulb of I could explain things to her only through my timing and my reinforcers. I didn't need to do anything else. I could talk to her through reinforcement only. That opened a second door to me. The first door opening in just the possibility to use positive reinforcement and not telling the animal that they did anything wrong. But the second door was opened with this experience of shaping without any aids.
Yeah, cool. And you started your dog training in 1992. I was 9 years old when you started your dog training.
Yeah, well, I'm 10 years older than you, so.
So you were 19 at that stage. Great age to start and great age to be introduced to positive reinforcement. How old were you when you were training your Welsh pony?
Oh, I don't know, 11, 12, 15, something like that. We got her, me and my sisters and my family, when I was 8.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with horses and rabbits and really wanting a dog.
And so when did you get your first dog?
19,
right. Okay. And so up until that point of getting your first dog, you were just reading about dog training.
Yep, and training my horses. But yes, a lot of reading about dog training, which I think was really, really good. Because with the family's first dog, a toddler, her name was Sickan, I went to puppy class, starting when she was 4 months old. But since I had spent a lot of years reading and waiting and planning, she already knew all the things that she was supposed to learn at that puppy class, right? And when trainers write about training, they want it to sound nice. Even the trainers who use a lot of aversives, they are, at least back then, they didn't really spell that out so much. It was fairly easy to read as if the training was supposed to be nice. And then for some of the authors, when I saw them in real life, they didn't exactly do what they were writing. But since I had been reading, I hadn't been going to any seminars. I hadn't been seeing anybody train a dog. I had just been doing reading. And this was way before internet, right? So I hadn't seen any dog training. I had just been reading about dog training. I think that helped for me to go into positive reinforcement training fairly much right away. And then I was also quite lucky with my puppy class instructors because they were just really sweet people. And since my puppy already knew the stuff that she was supposed to learn, nobody ever suggested that I should use any aversives to teach her anything.
So it's a pretty interesting transition you made, and you're lucky that you never got influenced at an early stage by an aversive trainer and got exposed to that, because a lot of people do, and then they find positive reinforcement later. You had good approximations basically to get you to where you are today.
I had my horse training background, but that can be a fairly aversive venue. But I was quite lucky also there, because even though the riding was mostly negative reinforcement, we had a wonderful dressage instructor really near where I lived. The second horse I have, an Arabian crossbreed, super sensitive. It was just never a good idea not from what I wanted to do and not from what would work with him, to apply a lot of aversives. So it would be fairly gentle negative reinforcement and a lot of systematic desensitization, although I didn't know the term at the time, in my pony years already.
So just thinking about what listeners can take away from this, and specifically speaking to people who might be closer to the start of their training journey. I know we've got a wide variety of people that listen to this podcast show. It's tempting, isn't it, when you start to dive straight in and pick up your clicker, pick up your treat pouch and just start training. What's your advice to people that are right at the start? Should we be just diving straight in, or should we be taking that time beforehand to read? And these days, obviously, we've got different resources than you had back then, but to absorb information, or should it be a combination of both or something else?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I do believe it should be a combination of both. If I look back at myself, I found it very valuable to separate the two. I did my reading and my thinking, but then when I actually sat down with my dog or went out with my horse, that was really just dive into it. Not thinking while doing, I think, would be the key there. I think also daring to dive in and just look at the information you get from your learner, getting that communication going with your animal moment to moment. I need to be super focused. I can't think about whatever somebody said in a book while I am sitting there with my dog, looking at her nose, seeing if it's pointing under a chair or not. At that moment, I need to be just in the moment. And I think that's important for everybody to allow themselves to be in the moment with their learner. And then afterwards, you can sort of step out and think, and, oh, how did that go? Can I ask somebody about suggestions for improvements or things like that? Sure. But I think the most important is to really be in the moment with the learner.
Mm-hmm. And then also, maybe more so now, or what's your thoughts on this compared to 1992, 15 years ago, or 1997, where you first learned about clicker training? Would you say
25
that...
years ago, Ryan, it's a long time.
Yeah.
Years back.
And so you were saying that you're reading in books about people who gave the impression that they were using techniques, but in reality, they were quite aversive compared to what they were writing. Was the information then comparable to now with regards to the ethical standpoint of how we are interacting with our animals and how we are training them? Or
no, I don't think so. I think it's improved a lot. I think I was lucky to also encounter some people who were really at the forefront here in promoting and living positive reinforcement. But still, I cannot recommend the books that they wrote 30 years ago now, because there will still be those sneaky little aversives in there that we can do without. And if I read really good books, the books that I would recommend now are still a lot better information, more thought through, more really looking at the ethical standpoints, and also more focused on what's in the best interest of our learners and how can we know? Because I think it was still back then a lot of how can we make our animals do the things that would be beneficial to us. And then it would be also talking about that the training procedures should be good for them. But I think, and that's something that I think we're seeing more and more in the past 10 years or 5 years or maybe even 2 years. What's in the interest of my animal? Can my animals communicate with me and tell me what they want right now? Not just for me to do training that's fun for them, but for them to really give me information of what they want. So that's an ethical perspective for me, and I think that's been a huge development.
Yeah, and so move on to the next question. Just trying to wrap it up and say what we can take away and learn from your personal journey. Be lucky, because it sounds like you got to meet some really great people, but obviously that's you also seeking them out. Spend time absorbing information and surround yourself with the right people and learn to listen from the start to your animal.
Yes, definitely. I think that's a good summary. And dare to think on your own in the midst of all this information. Sort of be your own person in that.
I said we're going to move on, but I want to explore that idea just a little bit before we do. How do we do this? How do we do this? What does that look like? Operationalize it for us.
Oh my, I don't know. For me, that would be, so on the agility course, I was competing high-level agility for 10 years, especially with Misty, my Papillon. And if I was walking the course and I find myself going on the opposite side of the dog walk compared to everybody else, I would just be smiling because I knew I was going to win that race. Because I knew that I was doing something that they were not. And it worked most of the time. And it's not that I was doing it opposite of them. I was doing it without looking at them. I was doing it thinking, what's going to be the best for us? Just totally in my bubble. And then when I poked my head out of the bubble and I looked at everybody else, I realized that, oh, are they going on that side? Okay, well, whatever. I'm going to win this because I know I have found the best path. And that's part of the don't ask others in the middle of your training session. There is something with this, allow myself to be focused on what I'm doing. And I honestly don't know for myself where that skill or where those behaviors come from. I mean, I remember the episodes from my Arabian cross pony. The very first time I had just gotten him. I was 14 years old. I was sitting on his back and we were on our first riding tour and I was gonna go uphill to our house. And he would start galloping at the bottom of the hill because he was just gonna race up that hill, right? So I would just sort of turn him back to the beginning and turn him back again and he could walk. And if he started galloping, I would just, turn him back to the beginning and turn around again and just be really persistent. And this is how we're doing this. I'm not gonna get excited. I'm not gonna question myself at that time if this is a good idea or a bad idea. It's just, well, this is what I'm thinking right now. This is what I'm doing right now. And I'm going to believe in it. And I'm going to keep doing it. And then I can ask myself later, I mean, today, would that be my recommendation for how to teach the pony to walk uphill? Probably not. Well, definitely not. But if I believe in what I'm doing at that minute, at least I'm not going to make a greater mess of it. I can always question myself later, but I don't want to question myself while I'm doing it.
So I like that you said in there a question, what's going to be best for us? Great question to ask yourself, I think. And you bring up, I'm just stalling maybe on to the next question because I can see the benefit this has for people. And I am comparing your input to some of my experience as well. I watched some of my early training videos back. There's people telling me stuff in the background, making suggestions, and they're really good suggestions, and they would have helped me in that training situation. But I look at those videos and I don't hear those people. I'm so focused on the animal that I'm just completely oblivious to the fact that those conversations and those inputs even went on. And after watching those videos back and going, oh, that would have been helpful. Maybe I should have listened to that. I kind of went down this path where I was like trying to pay more attention to what other people were saying whilst I'm training. But you're saying that don't do that. Everyone's different, but there's benefit in blocking that out and then revisiting it later.
Totally. I'm a firm believer in the benefit of blocking it out while you're training. I rarely see good things coming from people taking advice while they're working. I don't think I've ever seen any long-term benefits from that. And I'm also thinking that you should be careful taking advice and just going with them right away. So even if you were not listening, I mean, I really congratulate you on being able to block it out while you're training and not even noticing it, because I think that's a fabulous skill. And I also think that one should be careful if you listen to others' comments after your training and then, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And then you sort of, without thinking really carefully about it, you go with the idea that somebody else has just because they know more and it sounds like a good idea. Because even if they know more, like objectively, they cannot know you and your animal and your training history better than you do. Being careful about just implementing advice, I think, is actually a good idea.
Yeah, I got to go back and find that video and share it, because after watching it back, I felt embarrassed because I was like so blatantly just ignoring everyone. But I mean, if you think about it and you're in that session and you're waiting for that split second where you can reinforce the correct behavior, if you're shaping a new behavior, yeah, you're not going to be able to do that if you're listening to what other people are saying.
No way. And it's just, and it also, even if it might be a good idea at the time to do what they're saying, you're teaching yourself to be distracted. It's like the opposite of distraction proofing. It's opening up for distractions while training. And it's opening up both for distractions from other people and from the distractions of your own thoughts. Because, I mean, we are our worst distractions. Trying to think and plan and evaluate while training, it's like bunnies in your head.
So another thing you talked about there, and I know before the podcast we talked about a potential solution to this, to quietening and getting all of the bunnies in your head to station while you're training. One thing you mentioned was have confidence in what you're doing. And I've experienced when working with other trainers and trying to assist them in moving forward, that confidence in what they're doing is a big challenge that some people face. And I was just mentioning that this transitions quite nicely to something we were going to talk about. So maybe we can put that in here. You and I were talking before the podcast about something that we can do to help station train all of those bunnies in our mind. I don't know if that metaphor is making sense to people listening, but hopefully it will.
Well, look, if people think of a dog and you're trying to work with your dog in a field and there are bunnies hopping by and the dog is just looking at all the bunnies, that would be the metaphor you're looking for.
So you want that dog to have been already trained in that context to pay attention to you instead. And the thing I was going to build it into is we were talking about flowcharts.
Yes.
And how this could be beneficial to people going into training sessions, because I'm trying to think about the application of this for people listening. It's good for us to say, stay focused, ignore distractions, but social pressure is huge.
Yeah.
Especially if there's someone in the room that you perceive to be of higher status than you. For example, a vet who's telling you to do something that's going to put the animal in a fearful situation. And you'll say, no, but my animal knows how to do this. So there's a way that we can potentially help train that dog to be calm and focus with those bunnies running around, and that is using flowcharts, isn't it? Can you run everyone listening through what you and I were talking about before the podcast? Is that okay?
Absolutely. I love flowcharts. It's for Emily and myself, that's one of our thinking tools. We have been discussing this a lot lately because we do flowchart session at Clicker Expo, and I'm not sure how long we have been doing this, but I don't know how to think without flowcharts anymore. So flowchart would be a way to plot out what's going on in a training session, sort of moment to moment, who does what when. So when we were talking about this earlier and sort of trying to find an example, I was asking you about what was your latest training session that you did. So do you want to share that again?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. So my latest training session, which I did yesterday, was training a duration of being in a crate with the door shut with Phoebe, my dog.
So what did that look like? How did you start the session?
So basically what I'm trying to do with Phoebe is I'm trying to be creative and fit training sessions in whilst I'm working. And I also want Phoebe to be in crate while distracting things are going on. So she knows how to go into the crate and she's got a really positive association with it. And judging from her behavior, I perceive that she enjoys being in there. So I cued her to go into the crate, and then I shut the door and I reinforced, or actually something else happened in between that. I cued her to go in there. She would stand with her nose kind of poking out of the crate. So I called her to the back. I shut the door and then I reinforced that. And then I went back to work and I reinforced at random intervals for staying in that crate and for being in that crate and specifically for behaviors like lying down and doing things that I might label as relaxed.
Lovely. Good description. So if I were to plot this out in a flowchart, I would start probably on a paper in the upper left corner, and I would try to say what happens first. You're sitting there working. Is that the scenario?
Yep. I'm in my office and working.
Where is Phoebe at that time?
Phoebe's kind of, I think I've put a few antecedents in place that she knows that good things are likely about to happen. So she's at my feet waiting for instructions.
Cool. So I would then start there. Phoebe at your feet. That would be the first thing happening. And then I would set an arrow. And then what do? You crate?
I said the word crate.
And then what does she do?
She enters her crate and turns around. And at this stage in the training, she's sitting at the front of the crate. So her nose is poking out the front a little bit.
So Phoebe at feet, you say crate, Phoebe enters crate, facing door. And next thing would be you.
I just, because it's a crate that's open, it's not a plastic crate, it's a metal framed one. So I just kind of click my fingers at the back and she turns around and goes towards my hand. And then I actually forgot to say this before, I ask her to stay and she stays there and then I close the door.
And that means that we have a couple of more things to add in there. So we have from where she's in the crate facing door, you point to the back, she goes to the back, and then you cue stay and she stays. And then you close the door. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Lovely. And then we can go on with our flowchart from there. But I would like to actually back up a little bit here, just to show where more benefits of the flowchart. Because at all the points that we were talking about now, there could be alternative reality, if you wish. What if she's at the floor by your feet, you cue crate. What would you do if she didn't enter crate? What if we say set an arrow out from UQ crate to BB doesn't enter? Then what do you do?
I'd probably pause and try to process very quickly if she wasn't focused or the cue wasn't good enough. And then I would potentially re-cue again. And then and then do you want to know what would happen if she didn't crate then?
Yeah, just to make sure we covered all eventualities.
So once again, I'd quickly try to analyze if there was a reason that I could identify as to why she was choosing to stay at the feet rather than crate. And if it seems like there isn't one that I can easily find, I might ask for some different behaviors, some easier to perform behaviors, and then ask for crate again. And
would you then, so if I were to flowchart this, I would then put an arrow from her not entering crate, cue easy behavior, BB does easy behavior. What do you do then? Do you cue crate immediately, or do you reinforce the behavior?
I'll reinforce the easier behavior.
Cool.
I might also do an LRS. So just I will just sit still, and if she remains calm and attentive at my feet, then that would be what gets the cue for the next behavior, or either a piece of food, even just for that.
Cool. So all those options you can plot into your flowchart. In my experience, what will happen is that if we have a flowchart that sort of sums up where you always, I mean, like me talking to you now, it sounds like it's very clear in your mind when I sort of keep asking the questions. Oh, but then I do this, then I do that. That to me that's saying that you're fairly confident in what you're doing. That would be what confidence sort of looks like to me, is somebody who can easily flowchart their session and say fairly quickly what they're doing at every given moment. It's also a place where you sometimes can see things. If you see that you have like a lot of different options for yourself, then it's likely that it might be a bit difficult to execute in real life. If there are like 1,000 different things, like I may do this, I may do that, I may do that, or I may do that, then we know that there are a lot of decisions that are going to have to be made in that second. And that's always harder to do. I'm also going to borrow a saying that Emily uses a lot. That is that this is the only time that you can erase what just happened. You can actually play out the action in your flowchart. And then you can say, oh no, by the way, that's not what I'm going to do. And you can just erase it from your flowchart. We can never, ever erase in a training session in real life, but we can actually erase in our flowchart. It really, for me, it's a tool that really helps. And by the way, just to be done, just like you did it now, you do your training session sort of by heart first, and then you plot out what is it that I'm doing. And then eventually later you can think of a new training situation and you can plot it out beforehand. But in the beginning, when using flowcharts, in my experience, it's best to actually do the training first. Just by, I don't know, gut feeling or however you're doing them already. And then just plot out what is it that I'm doing in a session that I'm happy about. What is it that's going on? Because otherwise you might sort of over intellectualize it. It's not necessarily so that our thinking is better than our fingertips.
So with the flowchart, if you find that you've got too many decisions, if you've got too many arrows coming from, if this happens, then this might happen, this might happen, this might happen, this might happen, you can erase some of those and logically think through it as to what's going to be the best for you and your animal.
Yes. And what's going to be best is going to be more both like what's going to be the super best decision, but it's also what's actually going to happen. I would rather have something in my flowchart and in my training that I can do consistently than to desperately try to find the very best thing to do.
And the idea, am I correct here? The idea is to, we just did a segment of a larger flowchart. The idea is to have a flowchart on your piece of paper with no empty loops.
Yep, exactly. Everything always ties back, because in real life, there is always going to be, if I do this, then you do that, and I do this, and then you do that. And if there is an empty ending somewhere, life is going to fill it. I mean, in real life, there is going to be something happening. You're going to do something, and your animal is going to do something. So if there is an empty ending, it just means that you have no idea what's going to happen next. And usually the empty endings are on us. The animal is going to do what it's going to do. I mean, I can't decide for the animal. The animal gets to do whatever it does. I can't control that. The animal can have 1,000 different things it's going to do. But for myself, I can limit my choices and say, well, whatever, if something goes really weird, here are my 2 different things that I'm going to do.
So we started this conversation about flowcharts saying that in the session, you want to be focused on your animal. And we can say that this is you being creative and believing in yourself, having confidence in your own training. We can develop this confidence by going into that session knowing more clearly what we're going to do in each different situation, which we can benefit from having done a flowchart to help us understand this and to help us station train all the bunnies in our mind or get that dog focused on us with bunnies jumping all around. So non-confidence, consequently, kind of comes from life filling all of the empty loops in our flowchart that we haven't done yet. Does that make sense?
I love the summary. Well, to me, it makes sense.
Hopefully it makes sense to you guys listening as well.
We'll see.
So we don't normally let the first question drag on that long, but that was super beneficial. That is 100% okay, because I know that people are really going to benefit from the conversation that we've just had. So thank you very much for sharing about your behavioral odyssey. We will move on, Eva, because I want to kind of come up to where you are now. We've kind of heard about where you began, and you mentioned in 1997 you learned about clicker training then, and that, am I correct? That's kind of when your venture, your joint, whatever you want to call it, maybe you'll give us a more appropriate name for it. Carpe Momentum started with Emily. Is that around about the same time?
Yeah. I think the name came a bit later, but me and Emily, we met on the agility competitions around 97, 98. I know that we spent a lot of the summer in 1998 playing cards and hanging out at agility competitions and ended up talking to each other so much that nobody else could stand being around us, basically. We would be doing all the nerdy discussions. And then around that time, we both had puppies. So summer of 99, we both had puppies. So we were really at a very similar point in our training, doing a lot of thinking of how can we best train our young dogs. We were both also instructors at the time, so we were teaching. So also both really interested in learning and in behavior. So we did a lot of thinking and talking and discussing and figuring things out for our agility training. But basically it was just training discussions. It just happened to revolve around agility because that's what we were so busy doing at the time. And it's interesting how things sort of come together, because Emily and I live 400 kilometers apart. We've always done that. So we never sort of see each other on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis. But we did a lot of training conversations, and we met some really interesting people, including Morten and Cecilia from Canis, Scandinavian dog training company. And I think that was where we really got some encouragement to go off and start writing for the Canis magazine and to start giving seminars together. So when we started to do joint ventures in our writing and joint ventures in our seminars, then of course we had even more to discuss and more where we really needed to get specific in what is it that we are trying to do here? How do we explain to others what we're thinking? How do we sum this up? And that's also where what eventually became our agility book began, with Morten encouraging us to take all our writing and all our thoughts and put it together in a book. That then took us like 7 years to finish. And during this time, I was attending Bob Bailey's chicken camps. He was doing them in Sweden at the time with Marie Fogelqvist. So getting introductions into behavior analysis a little bit, basically through Bob Bailey. That was, I think, a good next step in our development as trainers, to go from basic clicker training to putting all our own material together and really finding the structure in what is it that we're doing, and then adding in more knowledge from behavior analysis through what we got from Bob Bailey. Because behavior analysis, we don't have you can't do your bachelor's degree in behavior analysis in Sweden. There are behavior analysis courses for professionals working within psychiatry or psychology, but I can't find behavior analysis studies, even if I wanted back then. They're still not out there. So it took a lot of years from me beginning to hear about the terms coming from behavior analysis to actually getting to study it myself. And somewhere in here in 2005, Emily and I had been teaching for some years, and we really believed that we were quite good at splitting and doing good teaching with our animals. But we did a lot of just stuffing things into the throats of our human learners. So in the process of refining our teaching skills, internet had now appeared on the scene, and I accidentally found Tag Teach. So we invited Teresa McKeon and Beth Wheeler to come here and give the first Scandinavian Tag Teach seminar in 2005. And that was also a big stepping stone moving forward in how we work with all our learners. I would say quite equal to the introduction of clicker training back in 97 would be the introduction of Tag Teach to the human learners in 2005. It's fun to look back because during those years, we were doing agility. It was agility and agility and agility and then a bit more agility. And sometimes we would be talking about, well, does this really make sense that we take all our time and all our effort and all our knowledge and all our skills and put it into this fun sport of us just running around with dogs on the field? But when we look back at it now, I mean, if we move forward like 10 more years, it's still, neither I nor Emily are training much agility or ever competing in agility anymore. But there's so much of our thinking and of our learning from that time. That's just the basis of what we're teaching today. Yeah, we were doing agility, but we were thinking behavior and thinking learning and thinking behavior analysis, I'd say. And then came Clicker Expo, which is an our wow factor. We got invited to be on the Clicker Expo faculty since Karen Pryor was publishing our agility book, and really that was amazing for us to see that she enjoyed our teaching so much that she wanted us to be part of the Clicker Expo faculty. So we've been doing that since 2009 now. And that means that we get to hang out with amazing trainers like 3 times every year, 2 times in the US and once back in Europe. That's a really important venue, both for getting to step into this bubble of positive reinforcement and just living there for a few days at a time, and getting to share our material and learn from a lot of other amazing trainers. That keeps us thinking, keeps us developing, I think.
And so moving forward now, what has Carpe Momentum turned into now? And where is it going over the next wee while? What's your plans next year?
Mm-hmm. So Carpe Momentum next year, since it's going to be our 20 years anniversary of working together.
I'll just stop you there and just say, because I was meant to say that then, 20 years. I just want to acknowledge that before it gets swept into a past conversation. 20 years is a huge accomplishment. So congratulations on that. That's amazing. I think that's really cool. You should be super proud.
Thank you. Yeah, we are. It's fun. We're having so much fun every time we get to work together. It's just so much fun. So we have our Clicker Expos in January and in March. We have plans to get some more of our presentations available online. We've been talking about that for quite some time. It hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen next year. So that's like the big plan. It's also that I have been sort of busy for the past year working in a project at one of our agricultural high schools. So I haven't been doing a lot in Carpe Momentum in 2017. But this project ends in January, meaning that next year I'm going to be back more full time in Carpe Momentum, which is going to be fun. So January, we have this CCC 2018 conference, which is going to be a cool beginning of the year, a conference of choice, control, and communication. And then in the summer, Laura Monaco Torelli is coming. We're doing a joint venture on cooperative care. But then Emily and I are really going to try to focus on getting more of our material available. Our computers are just so full of old presentations, and we go back and say, "Oh, wouldn't it be fun to do this one again? Oh, we should look at that again." And we just have to get ourselves together and actually do that.
So you're involved. What I'm taking away from this is you're involved in everything, and you haven't even mentioned some of the stuff you're involved in. You're also involved in SWABA, the Swedish Association for Behavior Analysis, and also really excited to talk about your involvement with Fear Free. Do you want to just touch on those two really quickly?
Oh, let's start with Fear Free, since that goes together with my project from this year. So as part of my involvement with this, the agriculture high school, and which is a part of our regional government for natural resources. Within that project, I got to work with adult education a bit, youth education a bit, and also in just developing the area of behavior management. So us doing a seminar on Fear Free. So Ken and Debbie Martin were here giving a seminar for about 70 people. And we also pulled together a group of both teachers from our school and opening it up for other professionals. So we have like 30 or 40 people who have been through or are currently going through the Fear-Free certification program, which I think is brilliant. I'm really, really glad this is happening. And I have a wonderful group of people that I have been sort of planning this with, Gabriella and Janicki and Carolina Westland, who you know of. So what we're seeing now is the people that have for many years tried pretty much single-handedly to develop working in the veterinary community are now starting, I think, to share more and to find sort of common ground and international contacts. And I think from what I'm seeing, it's been helpful. It's also cool to see that Fear-Free is a community for both the veterinary professionals and for dog trainers and for instructors and for owners. So it's really an effort to bring everybody together in working in the best interest of our animals.
And didn't they just I've been watching some New Zealand dog training Facebook groups, and there's been a lot of excitement there. There's been some new access just made available online, like literally this week, I think.
Yes, a trainer's course that's just become available. I don't know too much about it, but I know it's out there, and I have several friends who are beginning in that course now.
I know one of the New Zealand trainers said, "Hey, this is out," and then later that day said, "Hey, I'm halfway through it," and then the next day they posted their certificate.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Yeah, and I think Fear-Free, what I've been seeing is both it's good material and it's also a wonderful way to build your network and to find what are others actually doing. It's so easy to say, oh, I would love to do this, but I don't think it's going to work. It's going to be time. It's going to be the owners don't want this. The veterinarian don't want this. And then by looking at the Fear-Free material and joining the network there and getting the information that, oh, this person is actually doing this at the clinic. That person is actually charging clients for this type of work. Just getting the really good examples from all over the world. That's really a great added bonus.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I call it find your tribe.
Yes.
I've been talking about it with ATA members. I'm not sure if other people say that as well. Can you talk to the importance of that? You just mentioned it there, you know, the value in finding your community, your tribe. I think Susan Friedman refers to it as your village, the group of people that you can surround yourself with that are going to help with your confidence that we talked about earlier, but also provide examples and support for you wanting to move forward in this.
Ooh. And I would say absolutely yes to finding your tribe and then also build your tribe. You can be the vehicle of sort of developing that tribe. I think that's something that I'm passionate about doing, partly for really selfish reasons. If I want to have great people to train together with and I cannot find them, well, then hang out with a bunch of students. And if I teach them to train and give them inspiration as much as I can, then there will be people there who will be sort of my tribe. And that will attract more people interested in the same thing. So as soon as you have a small group of people really passionate about doing something, then you can attract others out in the people you didn't know existed. But if there is a group of people, that group of people has the potential of attracting more. And then you can find the bigger tribes that your small group wants to belong to. And I think just it's exposure. It's exposing yourself with the kinds of people and the kinds of idea that you want to build more of in yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of the things you were saying remind me of the Animal Training Academy community that's been building for the last 12 months or so with regards to the membership. And we call it Find Your Tribe in the membership. And as the membership grows, more and more people are meeting in person, and we get to nearly on a weekly basis now. We're posting photos of ATA members meeting. It's so much fun.
Lovely.
Definitely, we're all
lovely.
And ATA members that are listening, you guys inspire me so much as well. So to build upon what Eva just said, it's selfish as well. I love being the coordinator of this tribe as much as I can, and as everyone else is being, because it's changed my life to be surrounded by people that you get to know better and you add people to, and
it's highly reinforcing, isn't it?
Yeah, I get up at 5 every day to hang out with them. So.
Totally.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, that leads to the other tribe that you were mentioning that I'm a part of, which is BABA, or Behavior Analysis Association. The behavior analysis community to me is That's the really cool tribe to be a part of. That's where I can meet the people who I will find people like Joe Lang, who can give me references to anything that's appeared in any behavioral analytic journal since like the 50s. This thing that there are actually people out there who can answer a lot of the questions that you have. It's fascinating. And I think for me, it's extra fascinating since it took me such a long time from my first encounter with Bob Bailey back in 2002. I think it took me like 10 years to find where I could study behavior analysis properly, where I could go to university. Again, I stumbled upon it. I found through the International Behavior Analysis Association, I managed to figure out that there is a university in Sweden that has a course that's for professionals working with people with autism. So I sent them an email and said, I work with dogs and leopards and other animals. I don't have a clue about autism, but can I please be a part of this course? And they said yes. So I took that part-time, and there I met students and teachers who could tell me that, oh, by the way, there is a master's program in Norway that's really good. And I would never have found it. It's called Learning in Complex Systems at a Norwegian university. How am I supposed to know that that's behavior analysis? I don't know. But once I found it, that was again another step in Find Your Tribe. And I accidentally got to join, before I started my studies, I got to join a seminar that I found on the internet, found a PDF saying that there was going to be a seminar in Norway about complex stimulus control. And I was thinking, wow, that sounds interesting. That's just, I mean, I know this. Stimulus control, I know this, right? So I emailed Erik Arntzen, the professor who was holding the seminar, and I realized, and he said, yeah, sure, you can come and sit in the background. We don't mind. We welcome guests. And when I got there, I realized that this was a seminar for his doctoral students in the stimulus equivalence lab. So they are now discussing stimulus equivalence at a doctoral level. And I understood maybe 5% of what they were saying. I didn't have a clue. It was amazing. I mean, for me, that was like, wow, there's so much that I have no idea that it even exists. That's the behavior analysis tribe for me. It's like, wow, there's so much still beyond what I have been exposed to before.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing. That was a lot of fun to talk about. For our next question, I wanted to move on now and talk about something you actually have already mentioned, and that is your book, Agility Right from the Start. Can you just talk about this, what it is? You talked about how it came about, but talk about what people will learn in this book and maybe where they can go to get their hands on a copy.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I'll start at the end and say that the book is published by Sunshine Books, which is a KPCT company. So if you go to clicktraining.com, you can purchase the book from there. And well, its title is Agility Right from the Start, and it's sort of divided into 3 separate parts. The first part is general thoughts and ideas about behavior and learning. The second part is about foundation training for both the dog and the person. And the third part is where it's specific agility training. So it's actually a training book, a general training book that has an agility ending to it. The skills in it are aimed at agility, but they're also suited for a lot of other different venues. So if we were to write it again, we would probably reframe it a little bit and just say this is the E&E training book, and then have an agility appendix to it. The goal of the whole thing is happiness and confidence, and then successful fluent training that flows, seamless training, I'd say. And then we spend, I don't know how many hundreds of pages and 600 photos or something like that, talking about how to build seamless training sessions where both dog and handler are happy and confident throughout. And it's just interesting writing, and it's interesting now to look back at it, because partly there are like cookbook recipe, you do this first and then you do that and then you do that. But the idea with it is to convey principles over methods. So the cookbook recipes are more there to illustrate what that might look like. And then we hope that our readers will use the recipes that they feel fit their own training, and then write their own recipes for their training. And one of the parts of the book that has been used the most, I think, outside of agility training is the part that discusses noise and movement. In agility, that you have the teeter or the seesaw, the obstacle that ends in the middle of nowhere. It falls to the ground and it makes a big bang. And we want to teach dogs to think this is like a roller coaster. It's the best thing ever. So then we build the training in foundation skills of teaching dogs to really enjoy and by themselves create noise and movements. And that section of the book is what got it started in the first place. Because Emily and I had written this article to Agility Magazine, American Agility Magazine Clean Run, about noise and movement. And that was the only thing that we had written in English before 2005. So when we did that first Tag Teach seminar with Therese and Beth, we wanted to show them something, or they wanted to see something that we had written. And we only have that article. So we gave them the magazine and they took it back to the US and showed it to Karen Pryor, who read the article and sort of liked it and sent us an email saying, would you be interested in writing an agility book for me? And we were like, yeah, we have already begun in Swedish. We can do this in English instead. So it's interesting. I think that section is both sort of the core of our training and what got us started with the book in the first place.
So that kind of makes sense with regards to what you said earlier about your focus being behavior back in the day, but you were doing agility. So it makes sense that you wrote a book that kind of follows that thinking. And pretty big compliment to have Karen Pryor ask you to write a book.
Are you kidding? That was amazing. The whole process of working with Karen has been just fantastic.
And so it's about happiness and confidence, quite fitting as well that you say it's about training that flows. Mm-hmm. Our earlier conversation about flowchart and about seamless training. So I'll put a link to this book in the podcast write-up. So if you're listening are interested in checking this out, and I encourage you to, I know I will be. I don't have my copy yet, but after the new year, I will be looking at getting one sent to New Zealand. And I was talking to a New Zealand trainer the other day, Eva, and I said, I'm doing a podcast with you next week. And she's like, oh, yeah, agility right from the start. They have that at home. So you've definitely reached our shores.
You will also find it as an ebook. So you don't even have to have it sent.
I want to save trees.
Are nice, right?
What's that?
Paper books are nice.
Yeah, I want to save trees, but I realize that I buy everything on ebooks now, and I've got this plan to collect every book written by every podcast guest. So I can fill my bookshelf up with stuff that I know is sensational. So maybe I'll buy both. Maybe I'll buy both, and I'll actually read the ebook one, and then I'll just have the other one for a bookshelf of my tribe. How's that?
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, it's interesting how the process of writing really forced us to clarify our thoughts even further. Because we from the very beginning of the process, we had this feeling that we knew what was going to be in the pages. It just took us 7 years to fill them, and trying to be really clear. Like the phrase that we keep saying to ourselves is, what does that look like? What does it mean? What is it that we're envisioning? And we really tried to convey on every page, what does that look like? Who does what when in the training that we're describing?
I can't wait to get my hands on
it. We obviously didn't write flowcharts at that time because I don't think there are any flowcharts in the book. So that's probably our major advancement since the book came out, is to start working with flowcharts. So.
And did that come around from asking the question, what does that look like? Because that seems like something that would materialize if you asked that question, because you're talking about the book being about training that flows.
Totally. I have no idea how we managed to write the book without flowcharts in it. I think there are a few embryos to proper flowcharts, and then there are lists that you can just make circles around and they will be flowcharts, but it's not in the form of proper flowcharts yet. So, right. but I think the book and how we worked with it and how we tried to describe things, it had to end in us writing flowcharts, because otherwise we would end up just writing 1,000-page book to convey the rest of our training. Now we just compromise it into flowcharts instead.
So it's evolved, it's metamorphosizing. And what's next then? I'm trying to envision the future and how we can turn these things into apps, etc. Have you ever thought about that?
Ooh, that's not going to be me.
It's not going to be me either. It will be. We'll see.
We're going to have somebody really tech savvy to do that. Well, I'm going to say what's next. or what's already happening for us in our agility training and moving from this really old article on creating noise and movement, though. And that ties into what we're working mostly with now, which would be choice and control and start button behaviors and all of that. Because for Emily and myself, that also comes from how we teach dogs to enjoy noise and movement. It's about how can we teach our learners to enjoy and by themselves create the things that are potentially aversives, but that we're building into positives instead.
So that segues beautifully into the next conversation we were going to have. And when I mentioned to you that via Facebook Messenger that I wanted to discuss choice and control in this recording, and you asked me if we had a spare 5 hours. So as I said, this segues beautifully into this next question. So let's go with this flow, being the keyword of this podcast, and move into this discussion. Can you tell us a little bit more about these buttons you mentioned and choice and control? And you said this is where it's metamorphosizing to. So where are we now with choice and control? You've got this conference coming up in January.
Yes.
And where are we going? And how can the listeners of this podcast start to implement this stuff and take away some good takeaways for them?
I would start with actually looking at what are you doing already where your learner, or maybe not your learner, where your companion, not necessarily a learner at this time, just your companion. How does your companion animal tell you to do things? Can your companion animal ask you for things? Because that's like the ultimate communication. It's not me having my own agenda and me wanting to train my dog. It's turning it around and saying, okay, can my dog actually ask me specifically for the things that she wants right now? And in my experience, people who live with animals, they already have this communication going, but maybe it hasn't been verbalized and maybe it hasn't been thought through how you can develop it further. So that would be the first step I would take. And then the second step would be to look at the training procedures where we're working with desensitization and figure out how can we give our learners as much autonomy and choice and control as possible. Can they choose to be in the session or not? Can they actually make an educated choice based on their knowledge of what this session is going to involve for them? Because there is a difference between us sort of using training to trick our animals into situations where they don't want to be, and us using our training skills in a way that the whole scenario becomes reinforcing so that our animal opts in also the next time and the next time and the next time. So those are two very different angles, I think. And I think both are important. Both the aspect where you're developing your skills and listening to your learner or listening to your companion in that scenario, and where you help your companion develop their language. And then the other aspect would be the start buttons and stop buttons and really listening to your animal in your training sessions.
Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. So the concept is giving our animals communicative tools to actually facilitate them asking us for things.
Yeah, that's the one aspect, and that's where I would start.
And you mentioned that it's probable that this is occurring whether you have verbalized it or not in our homes. Can you give some examples that people might be able to relate to, where it might be happening with them and their dogs, or them and their animals they might be working in the zoo?
Everything where you put the label begging on it, I would say that's the simplest form of communication. Begging is just a label. It's a communication from the animal to you to give it something. That would be the simplest form. It may be the dog standing by the door whining for you to come open the door so that he can come out, or the giraffes pacing at the gates, beginning to pace when they see you arriving. That can approximate a language, right? If they start directing that pacing to you, then it's going to be their way of saying, hey, come on, open the gate quickly. It can start as just an anticipatory behavior that has nothing to do with you, just the being reinforced by the gates open. But if they start to direct it to you, if they start doing it when you're there and not when you're not there, that's how language works. That's how people talk. That's how people ask each other for things. And for me, then it makes sense to say that it's the same with our animals. If we see them doing the same thing in the same scenarios, we're going to call it, that they ask us for things. The thing is that often it begins very rudimentary, and too often I think it stays rudimentary. It stays with a dog that stands on the floor whining, and then you trying to guess, what is it now? And then you go through the routine. Do you want water? Do you want food? Do you maybe want me to pet you? Do you maybe want to go out? And then eventually the dog stops whining and you're like, oh, I managed to figure it out. That's similar to a newborn baby crying and parents trying to figure out, what is it that you want now? Is it this? Is it that? And then eventually the kid starts crying, and then it's like, okay, that's what you wanted. With human babies, it's very obvious for us that it's beneficial for the baby and for everybody around it to teach it more specific words or more specific gestures, so that the surroundings everybody around the baby can differentiate what is it that he or she wants now. And it's the same with our animals. If my dog can have one behavior when she wants water, another behavior when she wants food, a third behavior when she wants me, well, she doesn't, but if she wanted me to cuddle her, a fourth behavior for when she wants to go out, and we can train that just as we train every other behavior. It's just that the reinforcer here is going to be whatever the animal is asking for. So if Tisla scratches her water bowl, the reinforcer is always water. If she pounces her food balls that we have laying around on the floor, the reinforcer is always that I'm going to fill them with food. If she comes lay her head in my lap, which is her word for saying I want to go out, the reinforcer is always going to be that I'm going to let her out. And I think this is the area where I think 10 years from now, we will have so much more differentiated communication, so many more words and concepts that our animals will be using to talk to us. I saw a really cool video the other day from, I don't remember his name, man working with crocodiles. He goes under the name Croc Doc from Australia. He has a really cool video out on YouTube of an iguana of some sort, I think. I don't know the name of the species. It's asking to be let out of its enclosure by standing in a corner and waving. Really cool training. And it's just communication training. It's not supposed to be put on cue. It's not supposed to be me asking my dog to scratch her water bowl. It's her talking to me about her wanting water and me complying with her request by giving it to her.
And so if we are not providing the right consequences or providing them intermittently, things like the dog whining and the giraffe pacing, they can potentially escalate and turn into challenges for us moving forward. So the skill is what you're saying, to listen, to learn, to test, and to actually start to think about these things and implement training procedures to help set our animals up so they can ask for these things more successfully.
Yeah, both so that they can ask for them successfully, so that we don't end up with this extinction bursts, which would be the hyper pacing or the dog going from whining to barking and all the frustration that comes with it. And also for us, I'm going to be a happier companion to my dog if she can ask politely. So if she wants to go out, it's more practical for me if she comes to me and lets me know rather than standing by the door. Because if I'm not in the vicinity of the door, I might not even notice. And B, I would rather have her come put her head in my lap compared to incessant barking at the door. And C, if I know what's going in this vocabulary, I can also teach wait behaviors if I need to. So if she comes to ask me, can we go out? And I know that this is a behavior that has a reinforcer tied to it, I can add in other reinforcers for other behaviors if I need to. So I can ask her, if she says, can we go out? I can teach her, not now, but wait a little bit. And then I can reinforce her wait behavior by taking her out. It adds to my understanding of what she wants, and it adds to my capacity to actually teach her reasonably the things I want her to do instead. And hopefully people who know me and my dog are not listening currently, because then they will know where I don't have this. Like the dog barking instead of waiting nicely in conversations. She's not with me on the sofa now for that very reason. But that's just, I haven't taught her properly yet the conversational skills needed to be on a podcast. And that's like my bad. 10 years from now, we will have that. And not just by me teaching her to be quiet. That's not the idea. It's more teaching her effective behaviors to get what she wants.
And before you mentioned as well, start-stop buttons.
Yeah, that would be For the procedure where I have something that I'm training my animal to do. So that would be more for, it's going to be similar, but it's going to be for the scenarios where I have a behavioral goal in mind. I have something specific I want to teach her to do. That could be ride the teeter to the ground really fast so that it goes bang, or it could be my dog standing really still so that I can clean her ears, all the husbandry behaviors, all the veterinary behaviors. It could also be all the counter conditioning that I might want to make. So now when New Year's Eve is coming up, I might want to do some counter conditioning of sound of firework, meaning treats on the floor. If I can do this in a way that my dog tells me when to bring out the potentially aversive stimulus. So if my dog is on the teeter, traditional desensitization for me would be I move the teeter slightly and then she gets a treat. And then I move the teeter slightly and she gets a treat. Adding a start button to it would mean she nods her head. Then I move the teeter and she gets a treat. And then I do nothing. She bobs her head. And then the teeter moves and she gets a treat. If we're doing this with the fireworks, it would be maybe I have to start just giving her information on what we're doing. So I will turn the fireworks on really, really low and toss some treats and turn them off. And wait for her to tell me with her expression, with her eyes, with some behavior she does, that, okay, come on, do it once more. And then I turn it on and she gets her treats again. And in the veterinary procedures, it can be what I use if I use a hand target for her to press her nose against while I'm cleaning her ears, my hand target can be her start button. So she presses her nose to my palm, then and only then do I touch her ears. If she takes her nose away, that's her cue to me to take my hand off her ear. And I'm not going to start touching her again until she presses my palm again. It's looking at it as her cueing me when to move on.
So in that example, you train the target and then you start to shape the acceptance of touching the ears whilst she's got the nose to the target, as opposed to the example with the fireworks. You're waiting to capture something, some form of communication that she's going to give to you that says she's ready to go again.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to look slightly different in the two different scenarios. If we wanted to do it similar, I could do the same type of procedure as with the firework with the ears. If I chose, instead of having the target, I could choose a behavior that I just capture as she goes along. So maybe if I wanted to do it totally similar, just as an example, I could take my hand closer to do just one repetition of, when my hand comes closer to your ear, you'll get a treat. And then I wait and see, what does she do now? I can capture anything she's doing. Does she look up, look down, look away, look at my hand, look to the ground? If I just respond consistently to anything she's doing, that will develop into a start button. So if it's not going to be very practical if my hand's going to go to her ear, if she's going to touch my hand. So I'm going to go with her taking her nose away from my hand. Her nose goes away from my hand, then my hand goes up to her ear. I click, I treat. And then I wait for her to move her head in this similar position again. Then my hand goes to her ear, click and treat. The end product is going to be very similar, whether I use a behavior that's trained from before, as with a target, or whether I'm going to capture and shape a behavior that just develops within the training procedure. I could do that with the firework as well if I wanted. Say I wanted my dog to nod when to cue me to turn on the fireworks. I could do a session beforehand to just set the stage and prep her for nodding, of just click and treat for nodding. Nod, click, treat, nod, click, treat, nod, click, treat. And then when I turn the firework on, he's gonna do what she did in the repetition before and nod. And now instead of click, treat, I'm gonna go nod, firework, treat. And the firework, it's going to be a surprise the very first repetition, but since I respond consistently every single time, my dog will very quickly learn that, oh, my nodding now gives the consequence of firework and treat. Or with a target, my hand target behavior in this situation means that hand is going to come up to my ear and then I'm going to get my treat. My job is to make sure that the contingency is predictable for my learner. That's the only way she's going to be able to use her behavior as a start button to me, is if she can predict what comes next.
So in that instance, when you move to the fireworks, you first ask, so when you just starting to play the fireworks on a low volume, the first time you ask for the nod? Do you cue the nod? Then
Ooh, good question. I would have the nod voluntarily happening. And this is something that's interesting. This is going to be a little bit of a detour, but we work a lot with spontaneously offered behaviors, so a lot of shaping capturing. So I'm going to shape or capture the nodding and get repetitions of nod, click, treat, nod, click, treat, nod, click, treat without any cue. And then I'm going to just replace the consequence of the click with the consequence of the firework. The reason why I don't want a cue in there is I want to be able to look at the latency of the behavior as a judge for what's my animal thinking of this firework or this hand to the ears or whatever. And in my experience, it's going to be a quicker route and a more clear route if I don't add in also a wait behavior and a cue from me. So instead, I want to have just after each reinforcer, I do nothing and my animal does the start button behavior and then I go again. That's like the best scenario in my experience. Sometimes it's going to look different. It's going to depend on what props I'm going to use. Is it so that I need to present my hand? My hand was busy before, say I need both my hands to deliver the reinforcer, for example. Then it's going to be that there's going to be a cue or an opportunity opening, since I have to sort of put my hand out there for her to be able to touch it. But the less cues I put in this type of session, the better it is, I think.
And so this would have, you'd train this all in one kind of session. So you would, is that correct? You would kind of go in and get the nodding and then move to the firework, as opposed to go in and get the nodding, don't add the cue, go away, do something else, come back the next day and start again. You'd kind of do it all together. How would that
I can teach the nodding separately in 10 different sessions if I want. I can do 10 sessions of teaching the nod behavior. But then when I switch the consequence to being the firework, that would happen in one session. So it would be me begin a session with just nod, click, treat, nod, click, treat. And then just because I need to get the nodding going, I will probably have to do a little bit of shaping in that session, right? So that my dog gets into this loop of, oh, it's nodding that we're doing. I know this, I can do nodding. And then I will switch to the low frequency firework.
Right. So in between, let's say you did 10 sessions before you introduced the fireworks, in between them, the contingency of nodding food item, whatever you're using, the dog learns that only happens in the training sessions. So if it's offering nodding outside of the training sessions, it makes that connection.
Yeah, it's going to be in the training sessions only.
Right. Okay. So just before we move on, just quickly, I'm just looking at the time as well. Just one last thing. Where is this going? What do you see exciting things happening with this moving forward over the next 5-10 years?
Oh, I definitely think a shift from me deciding on all the goals to my animals communicating more directly to me. It's both a shift in what we teach and it's a shift in what our ultimate goals are. And we're seeing that already. For trainers, the ultimate goal going from me wanting to teach my dog this and this and this to me wanting to teach my dog whatever's going to benefit her. It's not for my benefit, it's more for her benefit. She's going to benefit from being able to ask for water, even if there is no water bowl. I just realized that. She doesn't have a good, or I have known that for some time, but it becomes obvious when she's in a scenario where there is no empty water bowl, she doesn't have a word to tell me, hey, you forgot the water bowl. So she has to improvise and sort of start scratching corners and stuff. I think in 10 years, I will know that from the very beginning, that it's a good idea to teach my dog language skills that she can use in different environments and that she can use with different people so that she can talk more effectively and tell us what she wants and needs. And I also think that we will have figured out more on, well, how then does this really work in real life when I try to convey it to other people? I mean, it's one thing for me to do this type of work with myself and my own animals and with with private lessons and with friends. But if I were to do a group lesson of puppy class, just 5 evenings, I haven't done a lot of that yet with this type of training. I really look forward to doing more of that. I think that's something that's going to be easy 10 years from now. Currently, it's like, wow, I'm not sure how to do this. That's going to be interesting. 10 years from now, that should be just basics. Of course, that's what we do.
That's the title of the next book.
Totally.
And so you mentioned it's more about moving forward, building on the ability for our animals to communicate to us what they want as opposed to what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So does this mean that we will be, for example, I'm just trying to think of something where this applies to a large amount of people, asking our horses if they want to be ridden or if they want to participate in some of the events we get them to do?
Yes, definitely. And I love the fact that I have friends and students doing this, asking the horse both, do you want to be ridden, but also giving the horse a way to say, get off, please. So yes, definitely. It's going to be things like, for me, walking my dog. Do you think it's and I'm trying to do this already, but I'm looking forward to where this language is going to be more developed. Asking my dog, do you think it's a good idea to enter into this venue? Should we go into this riding facility or should we go the other way? She's already telling me a lot of things like that, but we can have clearer communication, I'm sure. And it's a lot to do with me being able to tell her what she's getting herself into. It's not just her telling me yes or no. It's about my capacity to give her information in advance, saying, if we go into this house, this is what's going to happen in there. Do you think that's a good idea? There are going to be dogs in there. I don't necessarily need her to go in there and see the dogs and then say, no, I think this was a bad idea. I should be able to ask her on the outside, there are dogs in there. Are you ready? She can say yes or no.
This is exciting.
It's cool.
It's very cool.
I want to sort of fast forward 10 years and see where everybody's going with this. There's so much fun happening now.
I think if you rewind 20 years and mention that this is what you'd be talking about now, and if you did fast forward 10 years, it would be also very exciting to hear what we're talking about then.
Very true. Very true. And I really think that it's our training skills that's going to get us there. It's our understanding, like scientific understanding of behavior. This is what people who work with kids with autism, this is what they do. I mean, they're already doing this. And if we add the clicker training skills and the detailed shaping skills of animal trainers to that, the science of behavior to our advantage, this is definitely within reach.
We're going to move on. Thank you so much for all of this. Sadly, though, we are going to head towards the end. That's okay, because we're heading into one of my favorite parts of the podcast show, and this is called Story Time. Can you please share with everyone listening 2 or 3 stories from your experience training animals so far and some of the important lessons these have taught you along the way?
Oh, wow. Well, one story that's not too long ago, I had the opportunity to work with giraffes in a zoo in southern parts of Norway. And it has to do with the area of choice again and of predictability. And to me, it was interesting because I actually did the experiment with this. So I met this giraffe who is fairly consistently coming over seemingly to say hi to people. So he comes over to the fence and puts his head down, and both keepers and visitors, you stand there and you have this giraffe coming really close to you with his head. And it's very tempting to just reach up and pat him on the nose. So obviously a lot of people did that, right? So he comes over and he stands there and you pat him on the nose and he stands still for a little bit and then he moves on. And I was really curious to what's this about? Does he actually enjoy this pat on the nose? And when asking visitors what they thought, of course they thought he liked it. It's like, yes, he's coming over because he likes this pat on the nose. So we ran a little bit of an experiment, giving him different targets for whether he wanted a pat on the nose, which was the reinforcer for the plastic target, or if he just wanted plain food, which was the reinforcer for the paper target. If he could choose to have a pat or nothing, he would choose nothing. That was evident after 2 sessions. And if we gave, food, of course, he always wanted. If we gave him the choice between a pat and food or just food, thinking that if that pat is even remotely reinforcing, he would prefer to get both rather than just the food, right? It was, again, very obvious. He opted out of the patting instantly. For me, this is I love data collection. I'm just not really doing it a lot. This is something I should do so much more of. And this for me was such a cool experiment in really getting to ask him, how do you feel about this? And being systematic about it. And him giving me such clear information of what he thought about me touching his nose. When I just made it predictable for him what the consequence was going to be, he was giving me clear information right away.
I was going to say, so the for the giraffe in let's call it baseline, just a normal everyday situation, talking about data collection, the reinforcement of the potential of food from a visitor.
That's my guess, yes.
Outweighed the adversive of being touched on the nose.
Yep.
Interesting. Really cool. And you've got a video of this, don't you, that we're going to share in the podcast right up?
Oh, yeah, right. Yes, I do. Let's do that.
So if you want to see this in action, see the experiment, the data collection, then head to www.animaltrainingacademy.com. And I don't know the exact URL of this podcast yet, but you'll be able to easily find it if you just navigate to the podcast section. Anyway, and you had another story to share before we move on?
Well, I'm going to use a story that's from my high school students, just because I think they work with animals that are often overlooked when it comes to the value of positive reinforcement training and giving the animal control over their everyday life experiences. We have a lot of small mammals in the animal care facility at our high school. One of them is the degu, which is a small rodent. And we have students who have been working with many different animals, starting to teach them to go into transport cages or pet boxes for when they need the animal out. And just getting to see this, I mean, it's a simple process. Step onto your hand, step into a box, stay into the box while I put the lid on, get your treats through the lid, be in the box for a little bit, and then be let out. And still, it's seeing students working on this with our small mammals. It's, for me, that's just thrilling. There's so many lovely components of that. There is the ethical side and the compassion of, we want to do this work because it's going to make life so much more easy for our animals. And there is the training skill needed, because we have animals that have a history of being caught and a history of being maybe put into transport cages that has not been completely positive. And just to see students work on reversing those processes, to me, that's like, it's ridiculously reinforcing. And to see them working with the small animals that you can catch, it's not going to bite you, it's not going to kill you, it's not going to kick you or scratch you. It might bite you and it might bleed from the tip of your finger, but you're not going to be really hurt. But to really see the students put in the effort and the time and the work to do this type of training, it's basic, but it's revolutionary.
Yeah, I love it. And definitely, if any of your students are listening, kudos to you. Big shout out to you. That's amazing that you're doing that. And just reminds me of Linda B from Nevada, if you're listening. She's doing this with her baby tortoise at the moment. And she's taught her tortoise to come along and step up onto her hand to be transported to the training area. And this tortoise, you should see this tortoise now. It's like for a tortoise, we're not talking about a cheetah here. For a tortoise, it's like a rocket. She puts her hand in there now. Over it comes, climb on, get some lettuce, go to training area.
Wonderful. Oh, I love it.
So great. And of course, you didn't fail to disappoint with those wonderful stories. That does sadly bring us to the last question, though. Eva, could you please take us all, we've done it a few times already in this podcast, but just to build on everything you've already said, take us all into the future and share with us what you would really like to see happen more over the next 5 to 10 years in the animal training world.
Oh, that's focus on every individual, that every individual counts. That's really what I'm seeing, in 10 years from now. Let's do it a little bit better. Can we make life a little bit better for this individual in this setting that we're in right now? Never mind if it's a rabbit or a lion or a service dog or a racehorse or whatever. What can we do? And just use to see behavior science put to use for good causes, just to see that spread more and more. And I don't care if everybody applying the principles of this science know about the science or not. That's not important. It's the important thing is the outcome, that what we do benefit our learners. Our knowledge of how behaviors work is just going to make it so much easier for us to do that. So that's why I hope that we're going to see the spreading of the knowledge of how behavior works, the scientific knowledge of how behavior works. Because the more that spreads, the easier it's going to be for everybody to make that positive impact individuals that we share our planet with.
So looking forward to your online contributions moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, good thing to say that out loud. That's
you're accountable now.
That's a cooperation for you.
And lastly, just tell everyone listening where they can go to find out more about you and what you're up to. Is there any links you want me to add to the write-up and we can direct people to?
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say please come to carpemomentum.nu, which is mine and Emily's joint venture website. And from there, we have links to all the different things that we do. And for everybody interested in coming to Scandinavia already in January, I would also, of course, go to ccc2018.se, which is our Choice Control Communication Conference. And it's fun because we are all Scandinavian speakers on the regular speaker list, but the conference is going to be in English, and we have a lot of guests coming from different parts of the globe. So it's going to be a cool meeting place.
Fantastic. And we'll link to all that stuff in the podcast write-up. And the website is in Swedish, isn't it?
There is an English section in the website. So on Carpe Momentum, there is an English section with some material on it. It's going to be on my list for 2018 to add more to that website in the English section as well.
A lot of people don't know this, Eva, and I do it all the time. Maybe I'll even include a link to it in the write-up. But if you use the Google Chrome browser, there's an extension that you can add to it. So what that means is you just click on something, you push download, and then every time you go to a non-English website, it'll just a pop-up will appear, and it will say, "Do you want to translate to English?" You click yes. And then you can view the entire website in English.
So lovely!
I was able to read your entire website, Eva, even though it's in Swedish.
I didn't know this. Wonderful.
So you save yourself some time there.
Thank you.
Such great vision to hear about the things you want to see moving forward. And of course, we're working really hard, all of us, to make these things transpire as we move forward. As mentioned, though, that does sadly bring us to the end. But before we wrap up, from myself and on behalf of everyone listening, Eva, thanks so much for taking time to come on this show today. It's really appreciated.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's been lovely to get to spend the evening with you, although we're on different sides of the planet. Thank you so much. Thank you also for all the work that you're doing, just bringing this community together, talking about building the tribe. It's wonderful.
Definitely. And we're very, very grateful for your contribution to everything as well. Some really inspiring stuff. And I know that it's going to create ripples, this podcast, for sure. We, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And as mentioned at the start, I want to ask a small favor of those listening. If you do enjoy these podcasts and to build on the future that Eva painted for us, and you are a practitioner of best practice behavior management yourself, you feel the information held within could help others, then please share this episode wherever you can, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, whatever you use, so that as a community, as a tribe, we can do absolutely everything within our power to disseminate this information as far and as wide as possible. One really easy way you can do this is if you are listening to it from your podcast app on your mobile device, there should be 3 little dots next to the title of the episode. This does change slightly between devices depending on apps. But if you're using your mobile device, you can click on that. There's going to be an option to share, and you can choose whatever social media platform you want to share it to, and it's done. Really simple. Takes you less than 30 seconds. If you could do that, that would be super. That's it for this episode, though. We will wrap it up there. Thanks again so much for listening. But for now, we better swish, jellyfish. You'll hear from us again soon.